right. Hello and welcome to this webinar about the Mid-Atlantic Arts Central Appalachia Living Traditions Experiences Grants. My name is Ellie Dassler. I'm the Program Director for Folk and Traditional Arts at Mid-Atlantic. I use she, her pronouns. And for anyone listening, I'm a white woman in her 30s with short, straight, dark hair and bangs, wearing big glasses and a black sweater. And I am speaking to you today from Richmond, Virginia. Mid-Atlantic Arts is headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland, but I live in Richmond, which is the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Powhatan peoples, including the Rappahannock, Pamunkey, Chickahominy, and Mattaponi tribes. And we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and future. My colleague, Joel Chapman, is also here today. You can see what I call our church directory photo up there on the screen. Joel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, we are devout followers to folk and traditional arts funding in the Mid-Atlantic region. I'm Joel Chapman. I'm the program associate for folk and traditional arts. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a white male with kind of shaggy blonde hair and wearing a white shirt today. You guys missed my glasses earlier, but I can put them back on if you like. Um, Wearing some purple blue light, maybe glasses. And I'm speaking to you from lovely Baltimore, where it is 54 and sunny. And it's also where Baltimore, Maryland, not Indiana, Baltimore, Maryland. And it's where Mid Atlantic Arts is headquartered on the unceded traditional lands of the Piscataway and Susquehannock peoples, as well as others. I think it's too dark for these today. So we'll have a question and answer period at the end of today's webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, you can just type it into the Q&A box, which you can find through the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And we also have live captioning. To turn on those captions, click More at the bottom of your screen and select Show Captions. During the webinar, we'll go over some highlights from the grant program guidelines, and you can see the full guidelines in text website as a PDF or an accessible Word file that's compatible with screen readers. If you have other questions about accessibility and this grant program, or you want to request accommodations, please get in touch with me, Joel Chapman, at least 10 days before the program due date, which is March 18th, 2026.
So this is our agenda for today's webinar. Like Joel mentioned, we will go over the most important parts of a program guidelines, and then we'll have time to answer your questions at the end. But feel free to use that Q&A box to type questions at any time during the webinar. Before we really dive in, I want to share a bit about Mid-Atlantic Arts. If you are not already familiar with us, we are one of the 6 regional arts organizations in the United States. Our member states and jurisdictions include Delaware, District of Columbia, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Virginia, and West Virginia. We are part of a national arts service ecosystem, which includes local arts agencies, state arts agencies, regional arts organizations like us, and the National Endowment for the Arts at the federal level. We also recently completed a new strategic planning process and have a new organization mission, which is to strengthen and serve the arts and culture ecosystem in our region by elevating local voices through accessible resources, programs, and partnerships. You can read more about the new strategic plan, which we're calling Imagine Next, on our website at that link on the screen, midatlanticarts.org/news-publications.
It's very exciting. This is the first webinar we've had
Yeah,
since our new strategic plan. I almost forgot. Wow,
that's how new it is.
it's just, I hope you guys are as jazzed as we are. So, what are the folk and traditional arts? Folk and traditional arts are commonly defined as the art of everyday life. They include expressive practices that are based in and reflective of the knowledge, beliefs, values, and aesthetics of cultural communities, such as families, geographic communities, occupational groups, ethnic heritage groups, and many more. They're often learned orally or by observation rather than in institutional or academic settings. And all traditions are deeply connected to their history, but they're also constantly evolving and adapting to their changing environment that they exist within. Folk and traditional arts include craft, foodways, dance, music, storytelling, and much, much more. Let's look at an example real quick. On here, we have a basket. I think we can all agree on that. Some folks might look at this picture and just see a basket, which would certainly be an example of folk art or folklore by itself. But if we take some time to consider the cultural context of this object, we know it's specifically a white oak basket from the Cub Run locality in south central Kentucky. We can learn additional knowledge like what it's made from, how to make it, who made it, where they are from, and in what context somebody would use it, the role it plays in someone's identity or a regional history, et cetera, et cetera. I can go on. These are all dimensions of what we call folklore. And folklorists have been wrestling with how to define the term folklore for over 130 years. And I actually think that's a strength of it because, like folklore itself, it remains an unexhaustive and flexible term to look at the homegrown art forms that are used for expression, communication, and so much more.
So, this grant program, Central Appalachia Living Traditions Experiences, is part of a larger program called Central Appalachia Living Traditions, or CALT. It's our fond little nickname for it. CALT is a multi-year program which is designed to promote the understanding and recognition of folk arts and culture in Central Appalachia by investing in communities, seeding new folk and traditional arts experiences, and honoring under-recognized practitioners of traditions within the region. CALT serves the counties of Ohio, Virginia, and West Virginia that are designated by the Appalachian Regional Commission, or ARC. You can find a full list of those counties on our website or in the program guidelines. And also, you'll want to note that when I was talking about the 10 states and jurisdictions that Mid-Atlantic Arts typically served, Ohio was not on that list. But Appalachian Ohio counties are included in the CALT region. We sort of borrow Appalachian Ohio from our friends at our sister regional arts organization, Arts Midwest, for the CALT program. So if you are calling in from Ohio today, you are in the right place. And within that larger CALT program, we do have these grants, the CALT Experiences grants, which fund public-facing projects and events in those ARC designated counties, which bring community members together around traditional arts practice and cultural knowledge. The CALT Experiences Grant program has three main goals. One, to encourage broad public awareness, understanding, and appreciation of living traditions. Two, to grow and share artistic skill and cultural knowledge. And three, to diversify the types of traditional arts activities that are happening in Central Appalachia. So in your application, you will need to explain how your project fits at least one of these three goals. So make sure you get to know them well as you're working on your application. Speaking of your projects, there are many different kinds of eligible projects that you can apply to this program to support. Those can include hands-on learning experiences, workshops, or demonstrations of traditional art, public folk art projects, exhibits, performances or performance series, festivals, media production and media broadcasts, such as film or video, radio, or podcasts, and documentation work, such as projects involving archival collections or fieldwork. There needs to be some publicly accessible component to your project. For some projects, that will be obvious. For example, a performance of traditional dance or music has an audience built in. And that audience could be the general public, or it could be geared toward a smaller subset of your community, such as K through 12 students, deaf or hard of hearing folks, or other musicians, for example. But for other types of projects, that public component may need some more thought. For example, if you want to apply for support for a fieldwork or documentary project, you should be able to explain plans for those documentary materials. If you do interviews or collect film footage, you should include in your application a plan for how you'll share that material with your community. This could be available in an accessible digital archive. You could plan a documentary film screening event, or the interviews you do could be part of a podcast series that's available to stream. These are just a few examples of eligible projects. You really have lots of options of projects that could work for a CALT Experiences application. And feel free to reach out to Joel or to me if you want to discuss your project ideas and confirm whether they would be eligible. We especially love to see projects that engage multi-generational participants or communities that have limited access to meaningful arts experiences or have historically had limited access to meaningful arts experiences.
Let's talk requirements. So for this program, nonprofit organizations, as well as individual folk and traditional artists or practitioners can apply for grants. You must live or be based in an ARC designated county in Ohio, Virginia, or West Virginia. In some cases, we will consider organizations and artists that are located next to, but primarily serve communities in the designated counties, as long as the proposed project meets all other grant criteria. Please reach out if you have specific questions about your eligibility. Eligible organizations must either be a registered 501c3 nonprofit, a unit of state or local government, or a federally recognized tribal government. Organization applicants need to provide an organizational tax ID or a letter to confirm status as a government entity. If you receive a grant, individual artists will be responsible for paying taxes on the grant award. You'll need to submit a W-9 with your tax information, and you will be issued an IRS 1099 form from Mid-Atlantic Arts. We can also connect you to other resources to help you manage your tax responsibilities. Recipients of past CALT Experiences grants are eligible to apply again. In fact, we love to see it. We love you guys coming back. You just need to be in good standing with Mid-Atlantic Arts and have no overdue final reports or grant documents from past grants, either from this program or any other programs. You can request between $1,000 and $10,000 in grant funding. How much you request does not impact how likely you are to receive the grant. So you should just request whatever makes sense for your project. Don't be afraid to go big. At least 85% of the awarded funding must be spent on specific direct costs of your project. Direct costs may include fees, travel, and lodging for artists, program staff salary, marketing and promotion, supplies and equipment, and printing and publishing. This year, for the first time, you may use up to 15% of your grant award for indirect costs. Indirect costs support you or your organization's day-to-day operating needs. Examples include ongoing overhead like rent and utilities or staff expenses for management or finance staff who aren't directly involved in the project but are still crucial for keeping your organization running. You'll specify in your project expenses in the budget section of your application. Taking advantage of that 15% indirect expenses is optional, and it won't affect your chances of receiving a grant. In fact, our review panel won't even look at the budget. Ellie and I will read it to make sure it's eligible, and we'll let you know about any revisions. If you have questions about direct versus indirect expenses, please reach out. Lastly, there's no match requirement for this program. That means you don't have to secure funding from anywhere else, and CALT Experiences could be your only funding source for your project. You might still have other funding sources depending on what you're doing, but it's not required.
Some of you may already know that CALT Experiences is not the only grant program we offer for traditional arts. We have another program called the Folk and Traditional Arts Community Projects Grants, which actually opened their applications yesterday and shares a lot in common with CALT Experiences. This year, you have to choose which one you want to apply for. You can only apply for either CALT Experiences or Folk and Traditional Arts Community Projects. So you'll need to decide which program to focus on before you apply. So to help you out with that, we're just going to go over some of the differences between the two programs. They both support events that highlight folk and traditional arts within your community. So that's the main similarity that they share. But which program should you go for? Some of the primary differences between these two programs have to do with their eligibility requirements. So all applicants to folk and traditional arts community projects grants must be organizations. Individual artists can't apply for community projects grants. You also must be located within Mid-Atlantic Art's regular 10-state region. This means that our Ohio friends are not eligible for community projects grants. On the other hand, for CALT Experiences, like we said, organizations and individual artists can apply. And for CALT Experiences, you must live or be based in an ARC designated county in Ohio, Virginia, or West Virginia. So if you're in Ohio or you're an individual artist, CALT Experiences is the grant for you. If you represent a nonprofit or a government entity in Appalachian, Virginia, or Appalachian, West Virginia, which is all of West Virginia, you could apply to either program. Another key difference between these programs is the available grant request amount. So for community projects grants, you can request up to $5,000. Importantly, the community projects grants must also be matched on a one-to-one basis, which means you have to have additional funding for your project from a different source that is at least equal to the amount that you request for the grant. On the other hand, like Joel just said, CALT Experiences grants, you can request up to $10,000 and they have no match requirement, which means you don't have to have any funding from anywhere else. CALT Experiences could be your only funding source for your project. Lastly, community projects funding can't be used for indirect expenses, direct costs only, where CALT Experiences funds, you can use up to 10% for indirect costs. So depending on the project you have in mind and how much money you need, this could impact your choice of application. For example, let's say you're planning a big festival, you already have some state or donor funding lined up, but you really want to include one more traditional artist and you need $3,000 for their artist fees. Community project grants could be a good fit for you. You already have other funding that you can use for the match, and a community projects grant could give you that boost of funding that you need to include this artist and really enhance the traditional arts content of your festival. On the other hand, if you're putting together a series of craft workshops, for example, this is a brand new program, you don't have any funding lined up yet, you might want to take advantage of the larger available grant request and the lack of match requirement that CALT Experiences has. If you're still not sure which grant is best for you, feel free to give us a call. We can help talk you through which grant will fit your needs best. There's also an upcoming webinar on January 20th about folk and traditional arts community projects, and I encourage you to join us for that webinar too, to learn more about that program. So let's say you've made it this far, you have this great project, it meets all the requirements, and you're confident you want to go for a CALT Experiences grant application. It's time to apply finally. To access the application, you'll visit midatlanticarts.smartsimple.com. SmartSimple is the name of the grant platform that we use to collect applications and award grants. If you've applied for a grant from Mid-Atlantic before, you will log into SmartSimple using your existing account. If you've never submitted a grant to us before, you'll need to create an account by clicking that purple register button at the bottom of the login screen. You'll select the applicant type that fits you. That could be registered nonprofit organization or individual artist, for example. And then you'll fill out some basic personal information and submit your registration. You'll then receive an email with a link to create a new password and verify your account. This email will come from noreply@smartsimple.com, and it might go to your spam folder. So keep an eye out if you don't see it come in within a few minutes of finishing your registration. Once you log in, you'll see your Smart Simple dashboard, which is what that top photo with all of the icons and the lines looks like. You'll scroll down to available applications and click on the big purple number above funding opportunities. CALT Folk and Traditional Arts Experiences will be the first opportunity in the list, and click Apply Now to get started. After you've started, you can find your saved in progress application on that dashboard under My Applications and In Progress. So you can, as long as you've saved, you can leave and come back as many times as you need to before you submit. Don't forget to save often so you don't lose any progress. The application itself includes several sections. Applicant information, which is basically your or your organization's contact details, project details, such as the dates of the project and the type of project, the project narrative, your work samples, and your budget. You can preview the narrative questions in the full guidelines on our website. Joel's going to talk about panelists in a few minutes. Those are the folks who review and score these applications, and they will only spend between 15 and 20 minutes reviewing each application. So you want to make sure you answer all the narrative questions concisely and that you're selective about the work samples that you choose. We recommend limiting yourself to 3 to 4 really strong work samples that complement your narrative and will help the panelists get to know you, your organization, and other artists you'll work with on the project. For work samples, you can submit audio, video, images, or documents. If you're sharing video or audio, it has to be available online somewhere like YouTube, Vimeo, or SoundCloud, and you'll share a URL for the panelists to access it. Images and documents you can upload directly to Smart Simple, and the reviewers will download them. All this information is in the guidelines, so you can see the guidelines for the full work sample requirements. And we've been saying this over and over again, but feel free to call us, reach out if you want to brainstorm about what kinds of work samples you should share to really fit the kind of project you're proposing.
A diverse group of folk and traditional arts specialists, including folklorists, cultural workers, artists, and practitioners from Central Appalachia, will serve as panelists to score applications and give feedback. Mid-Atlantic Arts staff, including me and Ellie, do not make decisions about who receives grants. That lets us advise you about your applications without a conflict of interest. Panelists will score applications based on 6 criteria. If you've applied in the past, these will look familiar. Please let us know, though, if you have any questions about criteria. First, we have traditional art form, which is weighed at 20 points. For this criterion, you should make sure that the panelists understand the art form your project features, its history and or modern role in your community, and why it's important. Project personnel, weighted at 10 points, shows you, your organization, and any partners and artists that you'll work with are a good fit for the project. You might share about your other practitioners' artist backgrounds, such as how you learned your practice, your organization's mission and history, etc. For the program goals criterion, you'll need to explain why your project fits those CALT goals that we went over earlier. The community collaboration criterion makes sure that you're putting the collaboration at the center of the project, working with artists and other partners in your area. The DEAI criterion, weighted at 20 points, shows that the project serves art forms, artists, or communities that are underrepresented or have difficulty accessing the arts. Your project should also show a clear path for accessibility accommodations for your audiences. Lastly, the evaluation criterion shows that you have a clear idea of what a successful project looks like and how to measure that. To complete, the complete review criteria are on our website. Again, please reach out if you have any questions about how to make sure your application addresses these criteria. Here's some tips as you work on your application. Start by reviewing the program guidelines on our website. Read them a couple times. It's kind of boring. It takes me a few times to read them over just to get it straight. Make sure you understand the program goals and the requirements before you start writing. Don't wait until the last minute. Give yourself plenty of time to create an account in an online system. Write your application narrative, assemble your work samples, and review everything before submitting. Also, reach out to us early if you want to discuss your application. We love talking to applicants. It's really the best part of our job, but the longer you wait, the harder it will be for us to answer your questions on time. And like I said before, make sure to choose high quality and relevant work samples that complement your application narrative. Work samples could, for example, help show that what your traditional art form is, how talented the artists are, or how engaged your organization is in your community. Next, let's make sure you understand the review criteria. Can't stress that enough. It's better for your application to address the criteria, or the better your application addresses the criteria, the higher the score you'll get, and the more likely it is for your project to be funded. And lastly, don't assume that the panelists are already familiar with your art forms that you want to feature. Really use the traditional art form and the project personnel questions, as well as the work samples, to help them get to know and convince them that they should receive funding. Pretend that you're meeting them for the first time. So it's March 18th. You've just submitted the greatest grant application of all time, totally blowing our socks off. What happens next? First, Mid-Atlantic staff, it's me, that's Ellie. We'll review your application to make sure it's eligible. Then the applications are sent to panelists who will evaluate them against those program criteria that we mentioned earlier. Fast forward a few weeks, and we'll get together with our lovely panelists to talk about the applications. Then they make grant recommendations, and we send those to our board of directors for approval. Notifications will go out to applicants about 3 months after the deadline. If you're given a grant, you'll have some paperwork to fill out to make it official, and then the grant money will be paid out. After your project's over, you must complete a final report telling us how it all went. You'll find the final report in Smart Simple, the same place that you completed the application. It will be due 30 days after your project ends. You can preview the questions for the final report in the guidelines, in the program guidelines. So before questions and answers, just a summary of important dates, some dates that you want to remember. All applications are due March 18th, 2026 by midnight Eastern time. We cannot accept late applications, so make sure you give yourself plenty of time to plan, ask us questions, and submit. We'll notify you about the status of your application, whether you receive funding or not, by June 18th. Funded projects must take place between July 1st, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. We call this the grant project period. If awarded, your final report will be due by July 30th, 2027 at the latest. Again, that's 30 days after your project ends.
And that's all we have to share with you today. Thank you so much for being here. Really hope this was helpful. Just threw a lot of information at you, So what questions do you have? Remember, you can type your questions using the Q&A field at the bottom of your screen. You can also just use the chat, but the Q&A is a little easier for us to make sure we've answered your question. And while y'all are thinking of questions and typing them, just going to share our contact information. I think we probably said like 30 or 40 times throughout this webinar to get in touch with us if you have questions as you work on your application. That's still true. Don't be shy. We also have open office hours most Wednesdays on Zoom from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. You can find the Zoom link for those office hours in the guidelines or on our website. And you don't have to register for those. You just join with the link, and then you'll enter a Zoom waiting room, and we'll talk to you in the order that you join. But if those office hours don't work for you, you can always reach out and we can have a conversation on your schedule. I see a couple of questions. Well, I'll leave this up for a couple of questions and then I'll stop sharing. Um, I see a question from Linda asking, is this webinar is being recorded? Can it be accessed to see again and share with others? Yes, the recording for this webinar will be available on our website in around a week. It takes us a little while to get it uploaded to our YouTube channel and everything, but it will be available for people to view after the fact.
Couple of questions that are related, so I'm gonna have them at the same time. Someone asked, can an organization apply for a program that was funded in the past, or do panelists want to see new initiatives? The related question is, if we received a grant last year, does the proposed project have to be different from last year's project? The answer to both of those is you do not need to have new projects or new initiatives for this grant. You can apply for the same project, or the same organization can apply as many times as you would like. And in fact, we have new panelists every year. So as far as they know, this will be a fresh project to their eyes.
We have a question from Rachel saying, what did your application pool look like last year and percentage funded? And you know what it will look like this year. And Rachel's a member of the West Virginia Humanities Council. We love the West Virginia Humanities Council. And you all don't always know your pools until you meet the grant reviewers. That's also true to a large extent for this program. So the CALT program is funded entirely from private funds. It's a multi-year funding for us, so we are able to plan a couple of years in advance. For this year, we have about $150,000 to give away. So we know that going in. We won't know exactly how many grants that translates to until we see how much folks are requesting. But last year we had a slightly larger amount of funding to give away, and we funded almost every application. I think we had about 80% got funded last year, which was around 22. Is that right, Joel? Or 22 grants
Yeah.
last year? But we had a larger pool of funding than we will have this year. So we don't have quite as much this year. But there's generally, we are lucky to generally be able to fund a large percentage of our applicant pool for this program. Although every year is
Hopefully we'll be
different.
able to do at least 60 to 70%,
Yeah,
but we'll see.
that's the goal. Good question. Other questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If you think of other questions, oh, we got one. We're on a state line and have some programs off-site. So could we include those activities, or do all of them have to happen in an ARC county? So all of the funded activities should take place in an ARC county. But if your project that you're applying for is part of like a larger initiative that has other funding behind it, it's okay if that larger initiative is not all within the ARC boundaries. But if you're planning to pay for activities with CALT grant funding, it should be paying for things that are happening within ARC counties. And again, if you have questions about that and want to talk it through in more detail, just let us know. But hopefully that gives you a baseline at least. All right.
Well, we'll
Well,
be in, hopefully y'all be in touch if anything else comes up.
thanks so much for being here. Like we said, this recording will be available in a few days. Hopefully, looking forward to seeing you all on email or on a phone call soon to talk about your ideas. Have a great afternoon. You want to stop recording, Joel?
Yes. Where'd it go?